This is the Griffin Podcast, episode number 107. We're in our seller plan, and the question on the table is, which projects should you complete as a seller pre-sale? Are you a home seller or a home buyer who has questions about selling or buying residential property? Or maybe you're an agent who needs a plan to build a better business, but you can't seem to find any way to get any of these answers. Well, then, hey, you're definitely in the right place. I'm Danny Griffin, the founder of The Griffin and the host of the Ask-A-Griffin podcast. Now, to help you take immediate action to get started in the right direction, if you're a seller, a buyer, or an agent, you can take advantage of our free, I said that, free, no obligation, step-by-step guides that are waiting for you at griffincourses.com. That's Griffin courses.com. All right, let's get started. The seller plan, one of our three major plans. We have a seller plan, a buyer plan, and an agent plan. Those are the three people we know how to help, and we start by giving away our best what to do stuff for free. So here's a segment of our seller plan. You have to understand that there are projects that you should, if you can, complete before your sale. Now, we did talk about in a previous episode, maybe you don't know which ones to do, so the best thing to do is get a home inspection, just like the buyer's going to get. The buyer's going to have a home inspector come in, take a look at your property, take a list of all the deferred maintenance items, and then they're going to present that to the buyer, and that could hurt the value that you're trying to achieve. It could hurt the sale altogether, and somebody could walk away because you've missed some significant things. But let's just start with the easier stuff. But I want to get into this, right? Think about this from a buyer's perspective first. So when we suggest you go out and make these things happen, this is for your benefit, but it's because we know what the buyer sees. So the buyers, you have to understand, will discount your property, meaning their perceived value of what it is versus other options that they have, okay? They will discount your property based on the amount of deferred maintenance that they perceive there is. So when I say perceive, because they're not home inspectors themselves, they hire somebody to do that. But before a home inspector is hired by a buyer, they walk through your property most of the time. I mean, it's rare that a house just gets sold completely digitally. Maybe someday in the metaverse that will happen. But right now, for the majority by far, people are going to walk through your house and they're going to make a value judgment based on what their eyeballs see. So if they see little things, chipped paint, for example. So I have a beautiful property that I'm selling in Beacon Hill, Boston, and has very low wear and tear on it, very low. But when you walk around and you take a little fine-tooth view of what happens here, when they moved out, there are some nicks and some dings along the paint, where the paint was in the door frames. Not much, but to my trained eye, it's there. The good news is that I asked the seller to prepare and at least deep clean some of the stuff. And so when it was cleaned down, a lot of it was scuff marks or moving marks, that type of thing. It wasn't really chipping in the paint. And all of a sudden, this low-cost project transformed this place. So sometimes just that cleaning, and I'll get into that in other episodes, but just cleaning a place up can be a low-cost project that really it's weird to say that that's deferred maintenance, because a lot of you say, well, I clean my house. Well, you do, but you don't really clean it deeply for sale. And there's a difference. Sometimes when somebody comes in and washes down your walls, washes all your cabinetry, you can get rid of some of the marks and the smells and the things that you think aren't a big deal, but that's deferred maintenance too. It's the lightest kind, because it's cleaning. But then once that's done, now you take a look back and you say, okay, could I get a painter in here, right? Could I get a painter in here? Because that's probably the easiest thing to touch up, to clean up, that type of thing. Okay, the bathroom's fine, but the toilet bowl is cracked. Could I get a plumber in here to replace that? You see, you start to walk through with this critical eye as if you were the buyer and say, what do you see now that way? Not as the seller who's been living there and have been comfortable there and probably not even noticed that these things have happened, or, you turn a blind eye. Oh my gosh, I don't really want to call the plumber, right? But now it's through the eye of the buyer, because the buyer starts to see the cracked toilet, the chipped paint, the dirty wall, whatever it is, right? They start to see that. Now let's say it's a house. They get down into the basement and, oh boy, the water heater is 12 years old. And any home inspector is going to tell you, oh, the life of those is maximum 10 years old. Okay, I've got something that's going to pour water all over the floor. See how it begins to accumulate in the buyer's mind? There's something wrong with this property and I don't want to inherit it. So it really starts with these little low-cost projects. So that's why we say the best advice is complete the low to no-cost projects first. Do them first. Because as you start to do those, you're going to notice your house transforming. Now, be careful. You're going to fall in love with your house again, some of you. As you start to do this, you're like, why didn't I do this when I was living here? Well, okay. You before you get into all this, just reconnect to a real reason why you want to sell it to begin with so that you don't start to play with your emotions here. This is for sale, right? So you're doing these things for the sale to enhance the value. But you'll be shocked at how all these little to no cost projects really begin to transform the place. And there's nothing more satisfying as a real estate agent, and I'm thinking of one of the houses I was just in, to walk into the basement and see a beautiful brand new burner. Okay. It was beautiful. It was in great shape. To see air conditioning had been added to this house that was older. Those are things, in spite of the fact that, oh my goodness, we have to help her get dumpsters and dumpsters of stuff thrown out so that we can even see the palette we're working with and see what other projects we might need. But the roof is already done. Awesome. Because that's a big item. The trim is already done. The boiler's already done. See, some homeowners really get it. They stay out in front of all of this maintenance and buildup instead of just dismissing it, turning a blind eye. So rather than do the big ones first, do the small ones, because that will really kind of show you what's going to really stand out, right? And so low to no cost sounds good, doesn't it? So the key point here is that, I'm going to say this again from a buyer's perspective, even these small projects, when they get completed, they'll begin to give your property a more solid feel. Now, this is going to sound weird when I say it, because what do you mean solid feeling? Well, the way that I would express that as a buyer myself is when I see things that have been taken care of, I don't have this sense of anxiety that it's falling apart. So these are feelings now. I'm not talking about construction. Construction is the job of the home inspector. I mean, as an expert at this for a long time, I understand what solid feels like to me for real, structurally, but I'm not a structural engineer. I'm not a home inspector. I am a real estate broker who has a good intuition about this after doing it for a very long time. But I'm telling you more so about perception. That when I click on my brain to go buy something for myself, I'm looking for a feeling too. I'm very intuitive, and so are many buyers. When they get in that house, remember, this is a home for most people. Some people are investors, they're looking for extractable value. They can fix it up and they can rent it out for more, whatever. And they're looking for a solid place physically. But I'm talking about the homeowner potential, the buyer, who's looking for a feeling. And so if all of a sudden there's just all this chip stuff, or a piece of trim really got broken, it's hanging off, or there's a cracked window, or there's a ripped screen, it just doesn't feel solid. Something feels off. And if that's what I can see, what can't I see? See how the feeling changes? So this is a really, really big deal, that these small projects fix the screen, fix the cracked trim and paint it, paint the broken, or the chip trim. Do it. Oh, you have a broken burner, cover for your stove. Buy a new one. These are all little things that just make me feel like the house isn't falling apart if they're all fixed up. And it's a nice gesture. And as a percentage of the value of the house, it's usually really small. Think about what I'm saying. You go to sell a $500,000 house. I'm going to cheat to the lower end these days. I know $500,000 lower. You couldn't find something like that in Boston, really, that would be worth its salt. So it'd be tiny, by the way, but I'm going to take it anyway. $500,000. If you spent 1% $5,000 to really complete low to no cost projects, which would probably be gobbled up mostly by the painter and then just the knicky-knack things, you'd be blown away at the transformation of the house. But you say, where am I on the 5,000? Okay. Believe me, when you go to sell it, it's easy enough to get your hands on 5,000. Somebody can lend you 5,000 of home improvement in a nanosecond, especially if they know you're going to sell the property, right? So now you go in there, you get the painter in there, you buff this up, you fix the things I talked about. Now all of a sudden it's a completely different feel for 1%. What if that 1% translates into you getting a bidding war going because people that are first-time home buyers say, oh, this house is so clean, I don't have to do anything. Now all of a sudden it's a 5.25 house, $25,000 on $5,000 every day, all day, folks. See what I mean? Just a quick example. And these are things that really happen because we know, because we see it happen. And when we're working with the buyer, it's what we point out. All right, let me go back and talk about this, right? You're the seller in this case. This is the seller plan. We're in the section about condition of your property. And the question to you is, which projects should you complete pre-sale? Well, first of all, let's talk about the why this is even a subject. Because buyers are going to discount your property based on the amount of deferred maintenance they see and perceive. Secondly, so therefore, you should complete the low to no cost projects first. Right? So in other words, when I say no, what do I mean? We mean stuff that you can do with blood, sweat, and tears. Wipe down your own walls. Paint your own walls. I mean, there's a cost to the paint, but I'm talking about the labor. So low to no cost projects first, then step back and see what else you need to do. But the key point here is that even these small projects begin to give your property a more solid feeling. And that's what buyers are looking for. They're looking for a good feeling when they go to buy your property. All right. We'll summarize it by saying many people spend years living in a property and giving little consideration to selling someday. You just don't think about it. It's just the way this works. As a result, they tend to neglect maintenance projects that protect their future market value. Therefore, if you're thinking about selling, you must realize that buyers will perceive your property to be worth less if they have to assume responsibility for upgrading your home, especially the little things. So it's best to start with the lowest cost projects that give the home a more solid and clean and tight feeling. All right, remember, you can take immediate action to get started in the right direction if you're a seller, if you're a buyer, or you're an agent who wants help by getting a copy of our free step-by-step guides that are waiting for you at griffincourses.com. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen. We also post our content on YouTube, so don't forget to subscribe to the Griffin channel if you're over on YouTube, because we video all these as well. So if you want the video version of these, it's a big black banner with a white label, The Griffin, and our cool little logo over there. Go check it out. Join us over there. And by the way, feel free to comment. I would love to engage you in further questions that these podcasts stimulate. And I look for the comments all the time, okay? So feel free to do it and you can engage me directly. We'd also appreciate it if you would share our content with home sellers and buyers and real estate agents that might not be you, but they're in those lanes so that they get the help that they need. And they don't have to do business with us. Just make it a better place and a better way for them to make their way, I guess is what I should say, through this really difficult situation when you go to sell or buy. It's emotional. I know you all think you got it down pat. I've seen really smart people melt down many a time. But remember this, nobody's coming for you. Really, nobody's coming for you. They're not coming to hold your hand and walk you through this. So take some action and go get to work on a plan for buying, selling, or becoming a successful real estate agent. And we'll see you in the next episode to help you do just that. Thanks.